Welcome back to the Testudo Talk podcast. It's been a couple weeks since we've talked to you guys. Been on a little bit of a hiatus, but a lot has happened with Maryland men's basketball specifically in these last couple weeks. And that's what I, Emmett Siegel, along with Andrew Chodes, are here to talk to you guys about. Andrew, I'll let you start off the show with it's been, like I said, a little bit since we've recorded an episode, and it's been an eventful season, no doubt about that for Maryland men's basketball. So if you could just kind of give a word, maybe a sentence, just a brief description of the way the team has played over the last 3 weeks and just kind of a state of the team from your perspective.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of missed opportunities in the past few weeks for sure, and I think the team continues to confuse us a little bit. I mean, obviously a top five defense in the country according to most metrics, but the offense at times it just stalls out incredibly, and it's the close games, right? They since we talked, they moved to 1-7 in one possession games, which is a pretty insane metric, and they have a big opportunity tomorrow or Saturday rather against Illinois, but. Postseason aspirations still look grim, but I think this season has just been filled with missed opportunities, and especially in the last week, if you want to go more into specifics.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple games this year that have really felt like it could go either way, and Maryland's been on the wrong side of that. The Ohio State game recently, comes to mind first and foremost with all the missed free throws down the stretch, and then two overtime periods, and coming out on the wrong side of the result there. It's been a season that has felt just kind of plagued by games like that. I'm also thinking about the game at home against Rutgers. Just a really bad offensive showing from both teams, really. But Maryland ends up losing, and there's not really much you can say that they deserve to win that game, just the way they played on the offensive end.
Yeah.
Maryland. We've talked about this a little bit amongst ourselves, but good teams find ways to win those games, find ways to win close games, and come out on the right side of those. Maryland has not done that, and that's kind of things, unfortunately, that not so great teams do is they find ways to lose games that maybe they should win. And it's hard to say that Maryland should have won many of those games because it hasn't really proven itself as a team that's super capable of stringing together a lot of conference wins, especially in a Big Ten that's really jumbled in the middle, and a lot of teams very even. But when you look at this season so far, I think it's rendered to pretty much everyone a disappointment. Obviously still a little bit of time left, but pretty much no time, and you pretty much have to win out at this point if you want to even be in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. So, yeah, I think I'd agree with you. Missed opportunities are really what has shaped these last couple weeks. And it's kind of in my, at least in my perception, and we can talk a little bit more about it, but in my perception, kind of dwindled any remaining hopes that this team could compete for an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament. Now, winning the Big Ten tournament is realistically not going to happen for this team. You're kind of staring down the barrel of year or two of Kevin Willard ending a little bit prematurely.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of just the hound on the one possession thing. I mean, against Minnesota, they had a double-digit lead, blew that. Against Michigan State, they fight back in the second half, take a lead, and then they don't score for, I believe it was 5 or 6 minutes almost to end the game. Northwestern, you have a lead in the last minute, can't pull that off, right? So, like you said, just a lot of missed opportunities this season, and it's just when you look back at the season, it's almost like what could have been. But you're right, good teams find ways to win, and teams that struggle, especially Maryland offensively, it's Jameer Young, and he's not getting much help right now. Julian Reese has been on and off. Some games he'll look like one of the best big men in the country. Then other games he'll just really fall flat like he did against Ohio State, really struggled. If he makes some of his shots, some of his free throws, Maryland wins that game. Dante Scott, very hot and cold as well. Hasn't played his best basketball in the past few games, was on a higher trajectory, and he's kind of fallen off a little bit. One thing we can talk about, which is a positive, was the emergence of Deshaun Harris-Smith in the last game against Iowa. He looked really good, put up a career high 17 points. And if Maryland can get that consistent output from him, I think that's very telling for the future, and that's definitely a positive thing to take away. But again, it's only one game where he showed that, but still, at least a positive thing to see.
Yeah, in that Iowa game, it looked like it was kind of doomed, and then Maryland turned it around there in that second half and got the win. So that's their most recent game as of this recording. They have a game on Saturday against Illinois, like you said. Don't know how many of you will be listening before that, but we'll talk a little bit later about what that game has in store, what it might mean for the Terps. But yeah, that game against Iowa was it was a promising second half, especially like you said, Deshaun Harris-Smith really stood out there. The way he came off the bench, some lineup changes recently. Matty Traore, excuse me, put into the starting lineup. Jordan Geronimo not in the starting lineup at Ohio State. He had a hand injury, and then not in the starting lineup again against Iowa. Some more lineup changes with Jahari Long sliding in there. Jamie Kaiser also got a start. Matty Traore and Jordan Geronimo both went down with what looked like leg injuries, maybe knee injuries against Iowa. Traore's looked a little bit more serious at first glance, but at the time of this recording, we don't really have any further updates on them. Obviously, hoping for the best. But Maryland's, you're seeing what Kevin Willard kind of has to do at this point in the season. It's just kind of try and scramble and push any buttons he can. I think Deshaun Harris-Smith coming off the bench isn't a bad idea, and that's not just because he played well against Iowa, just because as a freshman, especially as a guard with some of the great guards in this league, and some of the guys like Jameer you have beside him that are a little bit more experienced. It's not a bad thing to let some of those more experienced guys kind of feel it out before throwing the freshman in there. And you kind of saw him, get more comfortable. Felt like he was playing a little bit looser against Iowa. At least that's what it looked like to me. Jamie Kaiser, as well as kind of, I won't say he's coming to his own because he's still got a lot to work on, but his role seems to be kind of becoming a little bit more comfortable with it. We have seen some development of those guys over the course of the year, which has been promising. But like you said, the real issues have been the fact that there isn't really a lot of depth to this team's offense. And the offense has been killing them. We can talk about the defense. It's been unbelievable, but the offense has just been killing them because it's Jameer Young. Sometimes it's Julian Reese, but pretty much everyone else, except for Jameer Young, is not stepping up on a consistent basis. Dante Scott, when he was playing well, his best stretch, which was a couple weeks ago, the team really looked like it, had a little bit more life than it did earlier in the year.
Yeah.
You're looking at wasting what's going to be an incredible season from Jameer Young. I mean, he has over 500 points this year, crossed the 1,000 point threshold for his Maryland career. He's not even done with his second season yet. I mean, this guy's going to be an all conference player again. He's had an unbelievable season, and it just feels like, I don't want to say a waste, but it kind of does feel like you're wasting such an amazing season from your point guard who's not going to be here next year, and you're going to have to answer some really tough questions that we'll get to at the end of the year. We don't need to, the season's not over yet, so we're not going to memorialize it quite yet. But you're looking at the season that Jameer Young is putting together. The fact that he's getting no help, I think that's going to be what I've remembered most so far from the season. What I probably will end up remembering most is just the way that this team wasn't constructed to give a guy that's so dynamic like that enough help to really, kind of push the team over the edge.
Yeah, no, and with the offense, it's just that they haven't been able to get the timely buckets they need late in games, and then the scoring droughts throughout. We've seen so many games where they'll go 5 minutes without a field goal, 6 minutes without a field goal, and all of a sudden they have this great defensive performance where they hold these teams to whatever, and then it kind of just wears out, right? Eventually, if you're not scoring and you have to, it's just the other teams are able to capitalize in transition, and that's hurt Maryland immensely. I think the comparison I told you the other day is that they're kind of playing like a Virginia team, right? The stout defense, but the offense is not able to get those timely buckets, and a team like Virginia, which I know is going to make Maryland fans angry, they're able to, right? And that's the difference between having 14 wins and having 19 wins, right? And you look at the season, significantly differently, but all you can do if you're Maryland at this point is you just have to take it game by game at this rate. And you mentioned the really crowded Big Ten. Like right now, I believe they're 11th or no, they're 10th in the conference, but it's so crowded. They can finish 13th in the conference, or they can finish fifth. Like it's really a matter of it's I think 2 games back right now. So you look at that and you really don't know what's gonna happen up to the Big Ten tournament. So it's really just a wait and see, and I guess just take it game by game.
Yeah, the Big Ten seems to kind of always play out like that, where it's like really mixed up in the middle, maybe a couple teams at the top. I mean, this year it feels like, it really feels like Purdue and everyone else. I know Wisconsin's kind of in that conversation,
Yeah, they fall.
Illinois when they're healthy, maybe, but yeah, it really feels like Purdue and everyone else. And then at the bottom, I don't know, Michigan's terrible this year. Penn State's maybe playing a little bit better than we thought, but they're not very good. But yeah, Maryland, you could slot, like you said, pretty much anywhere from like the early teens to like fifth right now,
Yeah.
like in just where they are, not even in terms of their record, just where you think they stack up with the other teams. They remind me, I think Virginia is a good comp. Just obviously the difference being that Virginia kind of embraces that identity a little bit more. And, also Virginia, their better teams at least are able to score the basketball. And that's the thing about Maryland that, has been the most confusing to me. And, this is once again, maybe a little bit of a discussion for a later date, but just the fact that it feels like it's been a couple years since Maryland has been like really dynamic on offense in any way, and I'm using dynamic very liberally here, like has had really like an offensive identity. Even in the seasons where they had like, Cowan and Sticks and, where they won a share of the Big Ten title, it felt like they were just kind of relying on really good players to bail themselves out. This is another coach ago. This is not a Kevin Willard problem. It's just weird that this feels like this is what Maryland's been recently. And, after last year, the way you saw them kind of come together towards the end of the year, especially the way they defended home court, defense really led them last year, but the thing was you had guys like Hakeem Hart to pick you up. You had guys like Patrick Emilian coming off the bench, Ian Martinez coming off the bench. You had Don Carey that was a threat from outside. And, we've talked enough about the 3-point shooting and how bad it's been. There are no reliable 3-point shooters on this team. Even Jamie Kaiser, Jameer Young, they'll hit a three here and there, but I wouldn't call them reliable by any means. You're just lacking. I would say that it really just comes down to roster construction so far, and we're rehashing stuff from the past. It's just, it just feels like this team is inherently flawed, and they're kind of trying to win in spite of that, as opposed to playing into their identity. And unfortunately, their identity is not, it's not working so far. And it's time's running out to the point where you can pretty much just say Maryland is what it is. I think we're past the point where we can say maybe they do this, maybe they do that. I think we kind of know what this team is. I think the sample size is there at this point. The season is coming to a close in about a month. Just the way I kind of look at this team, I just see a lot of flaws that are going to need to be shored up in the offseason. And it's going to be a really interesting last couple weeks to kind of see how this thing plays out. And maybe they can end the season on a positive note, build a little bit of momentum, maybe get some recruiting wins here and there. But it definitely doesn't feel like optimism around the program, just using anecdotal evidence of, us being students, being in College Park, being at all the games. Just doesn't really feel like there's much juice right now to the program, which I know was, one of the biggest concerns that people had under the later years of Mark Turgeon, was just kind of the stagnancy of the program. It feels like very quickly after a year where people were optimistic, we've kind of reverted right back to where we started when Willard arrived.
Yeah, no, I think that said pretty perfectly. And I think there's obviously there's still a season left, so it's not time to discuss this yet. But I think, discussions are starting about next season and where the roster construction is. Obviously, you're going to lose Jameer Young, you're going to lose Dante Scott. I know there's been some discussions about possible transfers. We won't get into that. But, there's a big 6'10" guy out of Baltimore that Maryland's obviously very keen on. So his decision might be coming fairly soon. But for Maryland, just you got to focus on the end of the season, right? You have opportunities. You kind of have to forget about those missed opportunities. And I'm really intrigued to see what happens, especially tomorrow against an Illinois team, which they've kind of owned in the past couple of years. Obviously, Illinois gets Terrence Shannon Jr. back, who they didn't have when Maryland went to Illinois a few weeks back and upset them. So I think tomorrow will be a really tough challenge for Maryland. Obviously, an Illinois team that's going to be frustrated, coming out with a vengeance with what happened last year as well when Maryland upset them at Xfinity Center. So we'll see what happens. I think Illinois is going to come out, give them their best shot, and I would give the edge to Illinois. I guess your thoughts.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Illinois should be rightfully favored in this game. I think Terrence Shannon Jr. coming back is so big. I mean, he's the best player on that team. For my money, he's probably the best player in the Big Ten, not named Zach Edey. He's an incredible player that really kind of just changes the dynamic of the game. And I think that's going to be really kind of the difference there. Like you said, Maryland has, for whatever reason, and I always compare Maryland and Illinois as kind of peers in the Big Ten, not necessarily because um, of their results or anything like that, but just because I feel like the fan bases, the programs have a lot of similarities. I've always kind of likened Illinois fans as kind of the closest basketball equivalent to Maryland fans, at least in the Big Ten, in my opinion. But interestingly enough, Maryland has, like you said, kind of dominated them, at least especially in recent years. I mean, Brad Underwood has never won at Xfinity Center. It seems like every time that Maryland goes to Illinois, it's a close game or Maryland wins, no matter who's ranked higher. So you never know, but I think Illinois should be the favorite in this game. They've proven it over the course of the season. I think Marcus Domask is playing unbelievable basketball right now. I mean, he's been playing it the whole year, but you talk about guys that are transferring up. We talk about Jameer Young all the time. Domask is a baller, right? He's playing unbelievable. And he's just kind of adding a whole nother layer to that team that's already so dynamic. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting game, and it's kind of one of those that You look at the Wisconsin game coming up on the road against a tough team that's, really, really tough to beat at their place, especially coming up early next week. For Maryland, this is, kind of maybe your last chance at really a signature win. Maybe the Wisconsin game, depending on how they finish the season. But you're looking at this game as kind of one of a very few fleeting opportunities left to really make a statement. Maybe kind of try to put yourself back in the picture here and help your Big Ten tournament seeding. Because if you're looking at having to face down the gauntlet of having to win the Big Ten tournament to make the NCAA tournament or even to make the NIT, whatever it may be, depending on the way the season ends, you're looking at you're looking at games like this as potential deciding factors when you get down to it. So I'm expecting Illinois to win this one, but it's Saturday at Xfinity, Illinois, the way they've played, against Maryland, could go either way. And a big game from Jameer Young, maybe Julian Reese steps up. Maybe you get a guy like Dante Scott, has a 15-20 point game, and then all of a sudden, you look up and you never know what happens. That's kind of the thing about this Maryland team is that like I don't have a lot of confidence in them to put together wins on a consistent basis, but the way they play defense and,
Yeah.
having a guy like Jameer Young means that there's never a game where you can go into it and say they have no chance.
Yeah, it's a really unpredictable team. Obviously, it depends if the offense can have a few shots go in. But I guess just to hound on this fact again, every game here on out for Maryland is unbelievably crucial for any postseason aspirations, whether that is the NIT or the NCAA tournament. Um, Gonna be probably a roller coaster of an end to the season, if we're being honest, just the way Maryland's played and the games have ended of recent, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting.
Yes, no doubt. I think what does Maryland have left? I can't remember off the top of my head, but you got not that many games left, less than 10. And Big Ten tournament coming up. These next couple weeks are going to be interesting. They're definitely, in my personal opinion, what I'm expecting. Assuming that they don't go on some miracle run here, not going to be nearly as interesting as maybe the next couple weeks after that, as we start to see, the way the roster starts to shape up for next year. We start to see kind of the discourse around Kevin Willard. We'll get into all that later. Once the season ends, and maybe we'll have kind of our own takes as we see as we see our own college careers end, and we see the future of the program and kind of what we've seen throughout. But yeah, these next couple weeks are going to be something for sure. I think the world, when I say the world, I mean the college basketball world is kind of forgotten about Maryland. There was a little bit of excitement at the beginning of the year. Maybe a lot of people picking them. No one in particular, maybe myself picking them to finish in the top four of the conference, maybe even make a run to the Sweet 16. But the way the season has gone, that does not that's not. I mean, the top four one's not in the cards. The Sweet 16 is pretty much a 0% chance at this point. Um, it'll be really interesting to see the way the season ends, the reaction to it, and then more than anything, the way that this team gets assembled for next year. And maybe Kevin Willard can kind of, learn from some of the mistakes maybe he made, not necessarily, knowing that this was how it's going to play out, but some of the mistakes that went down in terms of the roster construction, the scheduling and all that, and kind of, maybe right the ship a little bit as you head into a very crucial year three. If you're missing the NCAA tournament at Maryland, after making it the first year, kind of setting expectations there, missing the NCAA tournament at Maryland, that's a big deal. And, going into year three, it'll definitely be a lot of questions asked. But, once again, that's probably a discussion for another time where we'll kind of do a more of a state of the union of the program later in the season.
Yeah, I got nothing else. It's just wait and see right now for the end of the season. 6 more games left, by the way.
6 more games. So yeah, and you got two ranked opponents there.
Mhm.
One at home on Saturday, one on the road at Wisconsin on Tuesday night. Yeah, you said you have nothing else. I don't really have anything else. We'll see what happens on Saturday, and we'll be back hopefully a little bit more consistently on the podcast. We apologize for the couple weeks off. Very very hectic time of year, but thanks everyone for listening. As always, your support is so much appreciated. We thank you all for all your listening, for all your watching on YouTube, for all the reviews, all that stuff. It's greatly appreciated, and we love doing it. And you can also follow all of our writing at testudotimes.com, where we have coverage of not just the men's basketball team, but also women's basketball. And then all the spring sports are starting up too. So it's a busy time in the Maryland sports calendar. Maybe we'll have to get some spring sports coverage on here as well.